It was the secrets of heaven and earth I desired. And welcome to Alice's Shelf. So today's a good day out. We're going to talk about one of the most famous horror stories in the whole world, which was written by a woman. We'll talk about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So firstly, what is the plot of Frankenstein? We have a captain, Captain Robert Walton, whose ship is going to explore the North Pole. However, on his way, he encounters Viktor Frankenstein, who's on the verge of death. The story is told to us throughout a series of letters Robert has sent to his sister back in England. And within those letters, we have the story told by Viktor Frankenstein in his letters. Viktor describes his early life with his cousin Elizabeth, who later became his stepsister. It depends on which version of the novel you're reading, and his best friend, Henry Clerval. He enters the university to study chemistry and natural philosophy, but he ends up falling in love with alchemy and the secret of life and death, which he's decided to figure out. He then gathers a bunch of body parts from corpses and creates a monster that's 8 feet tall. But as soon as he sees his creation, he's so shocked by it, by how monstrous it is, that he just leaves. He runs into his friend, Henry, and he starts living in his apartment, and he gets incredibly ill. Later, he decides to go back to his hometown, only to receive a letter from his father saying that his youngest brother has been murdered. He goes back to his hometown, and wandering around the woods in which his brother was killed, he sees the creature, and he realizes that the creature killed his brother. If that wasn't bad enough, Justine, who was a girl who was adopted by the Frankenstein family, is convicted for murder on the first degree and executed for having killed William. After that, the monster encounters Viktor and tells him that he killed William in order to draw his creator's attention. And we get a glimpse of what the monster's life has been. Within Henry's story, we have Viktor's story, and within Viktor's story, we have the creature's story, telling us about how everyone would cast him away and scream at him and try to hit him and throw things at him because of his looks. So even when he was trying to help, he would always be misread. There's this very interesting part in the book, which is my favorite, in which the creature runs into this family in the woods, and the father of the family is a blind man. So he hides and starts investigating the family. So he learns how to talk, he learns how to read, and everything he learns from the world is through that. And eventually he comes to the man, and the man is super okay with him because he had been bringing logs to the family to keep the family warm all this time. And the blind man is super friendly towards him. But then the man's children comes and casts him away and starts screaming because of his looks. So yet again, nobody wants the creature around. So what he does is he comes to Viktor and he begs Viktor to create him a mate, a wife, someone who's as monstrous as him, so that they can seclude themselves together and live in peace. Viktor says no at first glance, but then finally surrenders to it. However, when he's on the verge of bringing the wife to life, he gives up and destroys the corpse, which causes the creature to go mad and say that he will have revenge on his creator. From that moment on, the creature kills Henry, Viktor's best friend, and Viktor's wife, which later causes Viktor's father to die of grief. Going mad over this hide-and-seek chase game, Viktor runs from the creature and eventually ends up landing on Captain Robert Walton's ship. In the ship, Viktor finally tells his story, which was a secret this whole time, and dies. After his death, the creature shows up and talks to the captain, saying that with Viktor's death, his life is finally over and he will seclude himself and die in peace. After that, the captain decides not to go further in his voyage and go back to England instead of risking people's lives on the ship. So let's talk about it. Firstly, let's look at our characters. We have Viktor Frankenstein. And what we know about Viktor is that he constantly refuses to accept the consequences of his own actions. Everything that happens in the novel is because he tried to play God. He tried to create life. And on doing so, and on misregarding the creature, he causes all of this death. And yet, he doesn't tell anyone. He knows what's going on, but he just stays quiet. Which is ironic because this helps building on a lack of humanity in Viktor. We see that our protagonist, which is the human in comparison to the monster, might be less human than the creature itself. Now let's talk about the creature. The thing about Frankenstein's creature is that it is not evil. Throughout most part of the novel, it is trying to do good, it helps people, it brings logs to the family. And when it starts murdering, it's after the whole society has cast it away and it is in desperate need of acceptance from its own creator, who refuses to give it to it. So the creature is not that bad. And yes, it does finally surrender to revenge, but only after everything has been taken away from it. Another very important character in this story is Captain Walton, because he is just as ambitious as Viktor. And this whole story has a lot to do with ambition. But after hearing Viktor's story, he gives up on his voyage and he decides to go back to England because it's too risky. Now let's talk about when the story was written. It's funny how it came to be because Mary Shelley was the wife of a very important writer. And then one day, amongst friends, including Bram Stoker, they made this bet of who could write the most horrifying horror story. And she couldn't do it. Until one day she had this nightmare about this huge creepy creature, and this is how Frankenstein came to be. And it became what we nowadays say it's the first ever project on science fiction. And it's very important to understand that the moment in which Mary Shelley wrote it was a moment in which we were talking about the development of electricity. The way people live their lives was changing completely, and it was very scary. So there is this whole theme throughout the novel on maybe some things shouldn't be studied. Maybe some knowledge shouldn't be acquired by human beings. Maybe there are things that belong in the nature. And that comes from this fear of the unknown, which is extremely common in humanity. People are scared of what they don't understand. And this kind of culminated on Frankenstein. Also, let's talk about how it's called. Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. What's that mean? So, Prometheus was a Greek titan that had defied the laws of the gods and given fire to humanity. When Zeus found that out, he trapped Prometheus in this rock in which he would have his liver eaten every day by an eagle and it would grow back every night. So, what did Prometheus do? He gave humanity something that belonged to the gods. And what did Viktor Frankenstein do? He defied the laws of God, because life is something that's supposed to be given by God, not by human people. Hence, the modern Prometheus. And what was the liver-eating eagle in Frankenstein's story? The murders. He loses everyone who's important to him because of his creation, because he refused to be human, because he tried to be God. And then he didn't accept the consequences to it. And talking about Prometheus, let's talk about the image of fire. Light and fire is something very important in this story. And we're talking about romanticism. And during romanticism, we had a lot of imagery concerning light. We talked about shadow when we talked about Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. And we'll talk about it when we talk about Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter next month. But romanticism had influences on impressionism and everything. And the work of light is very important in it. And what does light mean? Light means enlightenment, so it's a symbol for wisdom. So the world is a very dark place with secret passages and things that are yet to be discovered. And we are always aiming for the light. We're always aiming for the knowledge. And this is exactly what Viktor does in the novel. And there's a very important moment, which is when the creature gets to know what fire is. Because it realizes at the same time that fire brings light to the darkness and helps the creature see at night, the creature can touch it because it hurts. So once again, we go back to this motif of some knowledge shouldn't be accessed by human beings. Some knowledge is to remain in the natural world. Now, we've talked a lot about Viktor and the captain and the creature. What about the female characters? I mean, this channel is supposed to talk about feminine literature, it's not gynocriticism. But where are the female characters in Mary Shelley's novel? She was the daughter of a grand feminist. There must be some important characters there, right? There aren't. The female characters in Shelley's novels are so passive, they barely have any importance. So, for example, we talked about Justine. Justine is executed for a crime she did not commit. And even though she would repeatedly say, I did not do it, I did not kill William, it didn't matter. In the end, she got executed because Viktor didn't tell the truth. And talking about Viktor and his women, we have Elizabeth, who just waits impatiently but powerless for Viktor to come home so they can get married and everything. And then she gets up killed because the creature is set to avenge itself from Viktor. And she's just a victim of it. And then we have the female creature. We have the wife of the creature, which is aborted. It doesn't even come to life because Viktor gives up. Because of Viktor's fear of not being able to control yet another creature. So all of these female roles, they are put in a passive motion. And why could that be? Maybe because the story is told by Viktor. And Viktor is so self-centered, he keeps everything a secret even though he knows what's happening. He doesn't give two shits about the creature, and he just ignores all the women around him. There are some people who argue that there are some matters of sexuality within the book because Viktor is obsessed with Henry, and although he constantly says that he loves Elizabeth, they grew up as cousins, almost brother and sister, and then he doesn't want to have sex with her and everything. I think that's pushing it a little. I think there's no discussion of homosexuality within this point in the book. And this is me saying something. But we see how the female characters are mainly ignored and passive victims of the whole plot between a man and his male creature, told by yet another man. However, on this topic, there is a very interesting point, which is how Viktor pulls away from the heteronormative base of reproduction. Because life is supposed to be created after heterosexual intercourse. And he refuses that. Why should I just have sex if I can make a creature come to life with electricity? Are you horny for electricity? So yeah, there is a point in which he defies heterosexuality as a fundamental base for reproduction and for birth and the creation of life. So that's interesting. And one last point about the creature. I've been calling it the creature. I've been using pronouns he and it. I've been calling it the monster. It is frequently known as just the monster. And look, Viktor didn't even give it a name. And a lot of people think that was an airplane. And a lot of people think that the creature's name is Frankenstein. It's not. That's Viktor's name. The creature isn't even named. Look at how self-centered Viktor has to be. So, this was our review on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We can talk a little about Mary Shelley's life if you want to. Drop in the comments below. Let's talk about how she kept her husband's heart with her on her purse for the longest time. We can talk about Bram Stoker and Dracula. We can talk about a lot of that. Just let mama know. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share it with everyone. And remember, Frankenstein is a story about human ambition and defying the laws of gods and men. Kinky. I am Allison, and I'll see you next week for us to start talking about Angela Carter's The Blood Chamber. And always remember, life's a sin.